Welcome students to this session on cardiac cycle. What is a cycle? Cycle, it is a process which is repeating again and again. When a process is repeated again and again, you call that as a cycle. Here in the heart, you have a sequence of events occurring again and again in the heart, you have sequence of events occurring again and you call this as cardiac cycle. At the end of the session, the student should be able to define cardiac cycle, list the events of cardiac cycle, describe the pressure and volume changes in the ventricles and pressure changes that occur in atria and aorta. This comes under the physiology competency 5.3. Here you have the atria, the right atrium and the left atrium. You have the right ventricle and the left ventricle. The atria receives the venous blood, empties it into the right ventricle. From right ventricle, blood enters into the pulmonary circulation. The oxygenated blood is received by the left atria. Blood from left atria enters into the left ventricle to be pumped into the systemic circulation. You have valves guarding the entry of the ventricles and the exit region of the ventricles. The atrioventricular valve is the valve between the atrium and the ventricle. You have two valves, mitral valve and the tricuspid valve. The function of this valve is to prevent backflow of blood from the ventricle into the atria. You have the semilunar valve, again to the aortic and the pulmonary valve. This valve will prevent backflow from the great arteries into the ventricle. When you see the structure, the valve cusps are cup-like. Okay. So, when blood is flowing through the cup, the valves will be open. Backflow will cause closure of the valves. Closure and opening of the valve is occurring passively. The function of the valve is to allow only one-way flow. It opens with the forward flow and closes with the reversal of flow. The AV valve is thin, filmy and requires no backflow to cause closure. The atrioventricular valves have cauda tendineae and papillary muscle. The function of the papillary muscle is to prevent bulging of the valve into the atria, and whenever the ventricle is contracting, the cauda tendineae and papillary muscle will prevent opening of the valve into the atrial segment. The semilunar valves are heavier and they require rapid backflow for a few milliseconds for closure. What is cardiac cycle? Cardiac cycle are events that occur from the beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the second heartbeat. This is cardiac cycle. There are sequential changes that occur in the pressure, volume and flow in the chambers and in the blood vessels connected to the heart. Again, you have the electrical changes that are occurring, which is recorded as the electrocardiogram. You have the heart sounds that are occurring during this. So, all these together will form the cardiac cycle. Always, a mechanical activity will be preceded by an electrical stimulus. Electrical activity is followed by a contractile or mechanical activity. Systole is contraction of the heart and diastole is relaxation of the heart. We all know SA node is the pacemaker of the heart and there is something called as AV nodal delay. Is the AV nodal delay important or not? It is very important because this AV nodal delay will allow the atria to contract before the ventricle, thereby pumping the blood from the atria into the ventricle. Okay, here you can see atrial systole and atrial diastole, ventricular systole and ventricular diastole. The duration of atrial systole is very short. Rest of the time the heart or the atrium is in the diastolic phase. But when we talk of the ventricle, 3/4 of the duration is in the diastole and 1/4 will be in the systole. The total duration of cardiac cycle is 0.8 seconds. The atria has 0.8 seconds and ventricle is 0.8 seconds. Both the activities are occurring simultaneously. In the atria, you have systole and diastole. The atria spends just 0.1 seconds in systole. Most of the time is in the diastole. The ventricle spends 0.3 seconds in systole and the ventricular muscle is in the diastolic phase for 0.5 seconds. Systole is divided into 3 phases and diastole is divided into 5 phases. In the systole, this 0.3 seconds is shared by the isometric contraction phase, which is the shortest, 0.05 second. Then comes the maximum ejection phase and the reduced ejection phase. When we come to the diastole, it is totally 0.5 seconds. Protodiastole is very short. Then comes the isometric relaxation phase, rapid inflow phase, slow inflow or diastasis phase, and last rapid filling phase. So blood is coming, the venous blood is returning to the heart from the superior and the inferior vena cava. You have what valve here? You have the tricuspid valve. Blood enters from the right atrium into the ventricle. It moves out into the pulmonary circulation. You have the pulmonary trunk or the pulmonary artery through which the venous blood reaches the lung. Here you can see you have a valve. This is the pulmonary valve. Blood from the lung returns to the left atrium by means of the pulmonary veins. You have the mitral valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, blood is going to move into the systemic circulation through aorta. Here again you have the aortic valve. So this is the normal direction of blood flow. Always the valve will allow blood to flow in this direction. Any reversal of flow will cause closure of the valve.